Welcome to the Show Me Casey Schools podcast. I am Nina, and with me today we have Danielle, our Director of School Navigation, and Alexis Thuston with Kauffman School. She is the counselor there. Thank you all so much for joining me today.
Yeah, super happy to be here.
Having me.
All right, so we came in today because we noticed that Danielle was getting a lot of calls from families with high school students who were interested in transferring schools. And so we were having some conversations around that. What's happening? Are folks ending up at the wrong spot? Are they going to a school thinking that they have certain programs and then finding out that they don't? What's going on with students in high school transferring schools? And so that's kind of how this podcast episode came to be. We really want to talk to families and listeners about things that they can be doing in middle school and even before that to prepare for high school, some of the things that they need to be thinking about so that we can make sure that folks are getting to the right school that's a good fit for them, that they can stay in and graduate from.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. We're trying to decrease.
That's always the goal.
That's right. We're trying to decrease some of these transitions that are happening and then get them to graduation and get them to what they're doing beyond that. So we'll go ahead and kick off with just kind of level setting and getting some baseline information around like what our options are looking like in Kansas City as it relates to high school. Danielle, can you talk a little bit about the options that families have in terms of high schools, how many they are?
Yeah, there's, it's a high number, but I think it's going to be, good to really get into the nitty gritty of like how like the likelihood and getting into some of these options. For folks, of course, that don't have a full understanding of the Kansas City public school landscape, we have a whole episode on that.
Yes.
So please,
episode 1. Go
yes,
back and
like
watch it.
episode 1, please go back. Calling out our own episodes.
Right.
Please go back and listen to that to get you jump started, on this portion of the conversation. But yeah, when we really break it down, let's start with the public options first. So Kansas City Public Schools has 4 neighborhood schools. Those are assigned to you based on your address, okay? You're guaranteed a seat at those high schools. And those are probably going to be some of the larger high schools in this breakdown that we're talking about, okay? From there, Kansas City Public Schools also operates 2 signature schools. It's really good to know and understand what the school type is because it can also indicate where you're going to apply or enroll, and it's going to indicate if there's admissions requirements. So this is where it kind of gets tricky, right? Those signature schools have admissions requirements. We have Lincoln College Prep and Paseo, and you're going to need to have a GPA and a high GPA and good attendance and whatnot. And so to your point, Nina, you have to be, first, you don't know what you don't know, so you need to know it. And then you and your student need to be working and thinking about that through middle school, right? Middle school is the prepper for all of this. It's the G League before you get to the NBA, right?
And I think that's the thing. I think a lot of times parents think that the preparation is happening in high school for college, which obviously that is taking
100%.
place.
Yes.
But we need to get you to the high school that you need to be in to set you up for that.
Especially when you have more choices, it then becomes more options, and then each of those choices have options of themselves.
That's right.
So it's a lot of information to try to sift through to figure out that you're like, I thought I had time, but it starts a little bit sooner than you think.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so then we have our 11 public charter school options on top of that. So we're talking about 17 public school options alone. Public schools are going to be free and open to everyone to apply and or attend. But of those charter schools, it's going to require a intentful application, right? There's not admissions requirements, but there's an intentful application, and you need to know about these things. And then that's where the research is going to come in, that we really want folks to be doing either when they're looking for a middle school or at the beginning of middle school, really, little by little, chipping away at understanding and thinking about the pathways forward.
Yes, that's a good point. I think that kind of drives us into the next conversation or piece of the conversation around when to start exploring these high school options. I think one thing to note, and I hear you talking to families about this often, is really some of this has to start in elementary. Because of the way our landscape is set up, we have school options that are starting in elementary or middle school and going through 12th grade, right? And so I often hear you talking to families about, do you want to make this transition once, or do we want, depending on where you end up, you may have to do it again.
Right, right. And we want to decrease, that likelihood, right? We want you to be well informed so that you're making the best decision possible. We understand that movement's going to happen, right? People get new jobs, they move, these things happen, life happens, right? This is about really going into it, understanding and talking to your student about, where they see themselves. Are we looking for a college prep school? Are we looking for a school that has the opportunity to do courses in agriculture and auto, mechanics and whatnot, where you're getting technical certificates, and the connections and partnerships that a school has? Schools should be 100% ready to answer all of those types of questions. However, many of our public charter schools start in kindergarten.
Right.
So when we talk about the admissions and how many students any particular school is going to be accepting at any year, their goal is also to retain the students that they have, which is going to decrease that number. De La Salle, as of right now, is the only charter high school that is just a high school, right? That's going to have that massive open cohort availability. Other charter schools like Kauffman, like Crossroads, their students are going to be matriculating, which means that they may broaden their admissions, but it's not going to be 150 to 200 students per school year necessarily.
Yeah, and some of them do have stops. So I'll say for the Kauffman School, we enroll students in 5th and 6th grade pretty regularly, and that's something you can expect. But after that point, it's actually really hard to get enrolled in our school. I can't tell you the number of middle schoolers I see get enrolled in Kauffman. It just usually doesn't happen. We start earlier, and that's part of our prep and how we support our students. But you can't get into us at 8th grade. That's just not something we often allow unless there's a huge change that had happened, right? And it's some of that prep work and some of that self-awareness that you have to make those key decisions a little bit earlier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're talking, 4th grade, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You need to be thinking about, and this is not to scare families, right?
Right.
This is to tell them, here's your pathway. And what's great, Nina, is, again, Show Me KC Schools plug. We have our workbook. This is in conjunction with our school guide, with our website, where we have compiled all of these schools. Even for myself today, as someone who is talking to families on a daily basis, talking to colleagues on a daily basis, I still had to go and crunch the numbers. You know what I mean? To be like, okay,
a lot of information.
Right. And then I even had another moment when I'm on the website, on the K through 12 search page, and the filters that we have on the website are amazing. So it allows you to be able to filter by school type, filter by grade levels, so that we really can get a clear picture and we're not overwhelmed by the 88 to 90 schools that we have listed on the site that are everywhere from public into our private school sector as well, which is broken down with independent and faith-based. There's more schools there to be had, and some of them do have admissions requirements as well.
And I know for our listeners, it can sound absurd to start thinking about high school options in 4th grade, right? We're not saying that you have to have this figured out or a concrete plan, but it is good to start thinking about what are our next steps? Where do I want my student to go in middle school? What do we want that transition to be like into high school, right? And so, again, like Danielle mentioned, things happen in life. Changes happen, our students change, our families dynamics change.
Yeah.
So we understand that that's going to happen, but it is definitely something to start thinking about. and just kind of mentally mapping out a plan, or at least starting to dig into looking at what the options are, what those requirements are for those different schools. Priorities. Some of our schools have priorities. And so just kind of looking at those things to see what it is that's going to impact your student being able to attend certain schools. Because what we see happen sometimes is that people are like, all right, July, you start 9th grade next month.
Yeah, what are we going to do?
Yeah, what are we going to do?
And that's when it feels really stressful, right?
Yeah,
it's when
absolutely.
you get to that portion and you have to make a decision in a short amount of time.
Yep.
And your options truly become limited
Yes.
because of where you're at in the process.
Yes.
It's not to say you don't still have good options, because there are definitely still good options out there.
Absolutely.
And also that can feel really stressful when you feel those options being limited and then start to wonder, what are those impacts on my student?
Right.
And so truly, if you have the ability to start looking earlier, it's just to relieve some of that stress.
Right.
To have some of those plans, have some of those backup plans, right? Because life does happen. So it's not to say it's this or bust. It is, I could have all of these potentially.
And
or
I don't
one
have
of
the
these.
stress
Yes.
of making an immediate, decision as soon as I get offers to schools.
Exactly. I think it can be exciting too, though, right?
Yeah.
If you have a student who's bilingual, then maybe you're talking to schools about a what is the graduating with
Biliteracy.
thank you, ma'am. It
The
was
seal
literally
of dual biliteracy.
Thank you. Yes, it was on the tip of my
Seal of
tongue.
biliteracy,
Yes,
that's what
you
it
could
is.
tell.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so that's like
very
that's
fun.
a really that's a cool thing, right? There are so many neat and cool things. I think it's worth acknowledging that having this many options within a public school district, which Kansas City is not alone, right? Our friends in St. Louis have the same setup, and so do so many cities nationwide. But what happens when we do have so many options is that we've also then created what could be considered untraditional school options, right?
Absolutely.
It's not maybe going to look exactly the way that it looked for me or you or anyone else. And that could be a very small high school. So one of the things that I end up talking to students about a lot actually is sports. So sometimes when you have this many options and you have a smaller high school, it's not going to offer football. They're not going to have a football team. You have to have a huge school with a lot of kids
Yes,
to be
people
able
don't always realize that.
and they don't realize that, right? So if your kid is a sports buff, right? If you've got a daughter that is playing soccer, that's playing volleyball, if you have a son that's interested in football, to your point, Nina, like a lot of times these kids have been playing rec sports. They've been at the Y for a long time. If that's something that means a lot to them, then that's another way to approach these options to say, okay, we're looking for a school that has, great academic options and also the opportunity for my kid to participate in a sport or a specific program or a career pathway, or we're really dedicated to college and we want to ensure that we can take AP courses.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the exciting stuff, right? So if we're trying to remove some of the stressors, then we want you to sit down with your kiddo and really bring them into the conversation. I always tell families, you don't bring the kindergartner into the conversation when
We're
you're
making the decision.
Right, exactly. That is going to be made with, whoever your trusted, circle is or partner or whatnot. But when it comes time for the middle and high school discussion, pull your kid in.
Absolutely.
This is such a great moment for like self-autonomy and empowerment for them to really be thinking about this as well.
And I will say that if your student is thinking college, this is also a really good practice of what it looks like to determine what is my school of choice and what are options and how do I start to narrow down those lists.
Yeah.
Because similar to being so many options in high school, there are even more options when it comes
That's
to our
right.
college or trades. And so if you can already start making that decision and critical thinking skills as a younger person, you're already going to have that experience. So then when you're on to the next stage of life, when you're having to make your next big decision.
That's right.
And they deserve to be a part of that process.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember as a parent going through this process when my daughter was in middle school and thinking about having discussions around what what she wanted her high school experience to be, right? Like some of what you're saying, Danielle, in addition to like obviously wanting like strong academics, wanting opportunities for dual credits and AP courses and things like that. What do you want to do? You know, what is your social life going to look like? What kind of extracurricular activities are you thinking about doing?
For your child, it's every single social
She does
activity.
a lot. She does a lot. But that was something that we had to consider, right? Because to your point, if we're going for a smaller school, they may not have all of those different options. They may not have a debate team. They may not have a volleyball team. You have to think about those things and if it's something that your student wants to do. And also, on the flip side of that, right, like maybe the school that you're looking at is hitting on some things that's really important to you. Maybe they have some really strong dual language offerings or, you know, college prep offerings and things like that. And maybe your plan is to supplement those extracurricular activities outside of school. That's great. That's also an option.
Yeah.
But we want you to be thinking about that so you can prepare, right? Some of those things may cost. Some of those things may have some research involved with it. Also plugging our new website page for out of school time that we have that can help with that.
You got to plug those
some of those activities that you're looking for from when your student is not in school. But again, you want to be thinking about all of those things as you're preparing. Something that we even thought about was, okay, what is it going to look like to drive, right?
Transportation is huge.
We have schools that are downtown. Do I want you navigating that if you're driving? You know, those are things that we have to think about everyday life, right? I know when our navigators are meeting with parents of incoming kindergartners, right? We're talking about logistics and riding the bus and before and after care. You're still doing that with your middle and high school student as it relates to school. It's just going to be a little different and you're bringing them into that conversation as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, you know, Nina, you've talked a lot about when families are coming in to Show Me Casey schools. And unfortunately, you know, we do have families that either haven't, you know, received the information ahead of time. They're making a late decision. It's July before school's going to start in August, or maybe even school has started. They were on a wait list somewhere. They didn't, you know, we're just a little bit behind. I'm not, again, this is not meant to be scare tactics. These are just
circumstances that happen.
Absolutely. I call these triage cases. And I have a lot of families who are coming in and they have either forgotten or they just weren't quite informed and know the trajectory that you're on day one freshman year when it pertains to credit hours and graduation. And the goal is always graduation.
Absolutely.
But will you talk to us about that as far as just, you know, kind of getting into that overview and then what, I mean, it's exciting when I talk to the 8th graders about credits, you know, for their courses, they're like, oh, this is like a thing, right? Like they're like, okay, we're going to tally them up, but that can look differently.
Absolutely. Every school sets up credits a little bit differently. The state you're residing in, so like the state of Missouri, they have certain requirements of classes that students have to take.
Okay.
Or credits that they have to take more specifically.
Right.
Now, your school itself, though, could rename some of those credits and move things around. So I'll say, like, for my school at Kauffman, we have a film class. That is going to be one of their fine art credits.
Yeah.
Right. But then the class I teach with junior seminar, that's a practical art credit. Those are both requirements from the state of Missouri, but I can't tell you that other schools in Missouri and Kansas City have a junior seminar or have a fine arts film kind of class. That's where things can vary widely.
Yeah.
And when you think about the need to pivot, when that happens sometimes, I started at one high school and then through whatever needs, I no longer want to attend that school and want to go to another one. You have to be careful about those credits.
Yeah.
Because it can hurt graduation.
Right.
And the other thing you have to consider is how do they count their credits? We do year-long credits. So you have very few classes where in one semester you're actually going to get credit for that. You have to finish the full year and then you get that credit. So if you try to transfer from us at the end of maybe December, you're going to have a very different experience getting to your next school because you're going to have to fill additional credits because you didn't get them. You did not finish that full classwork in order to finish out all those credits. So it's some pieces like that that you have to be careful with. And your school administrators are great resources to be able to talk to you about what are your credits look like and what does transferring look like, whether it's from your school or to another one. But it's questions you really need to ask to see, is it worth it for me to transfer at this point if it potentially adds time or adds summertime for me to be able to cover so that I can still graduate in the time that I expected?
Right. The goal is graduation.
Yes.
That's right. And I think that that's also something that folks can be looking at and asking questions at City School Fair, at School Saturday, when you're going on tours and meeting with staff of these high schools. They are happy to share with you what those credit requirements are, their course catalog, so you can get a peek at to what classes may be offered. So that's something that you can ask for and can get to help and aid in that decision ahead of time as well when you're looking at making a decision for a high school. We talked a little bit about like the options and things like that. Can you all share things that you think students can be doing to prepare for the transition into high school?
Ooh, there's lots that students can do. I know that families really want to take on a lot of this burden from your students, and I love that. And also, now's the time. Let's push some of their responsibility and really guide and support them so that they can build those developmental skills that they really need to make those critical decisions, to analyze who they are and what they want, and bringing them into that fold to have that conversation. So it's some of the things you were talking about earlier about like, are there certain sports or certain activities that you really care about, that you really want to do? Let's start planning for those, because there's some of them that like you need to start earlier. You may not realistically, like if you decided, I don't know, you get to 10th grade and you're like, you know what, I want to be the star of the football team. Friend, that may just very well not pan out. Okay, we got to be real about that, especially when they then have things like maybe they don't have a football program, or maybe they don't have that program for band that you were really invested in. Those are some things you have to start looking and deciding. Is that something you want to experience or even try? Or are there different areas where you can still get that experience with that avenue, and really be thinking about that? But then also thinking about your level of rigor. What type of challenge do you want academically in those classrooms? Do you want the option for something that is really hands-on? Whether it's a shop class or you're working with different vocational skills. Do you want something that's much more like college prep, where you're going to get a lot of college credits and a lot of opportunities to take those advanced level classes? That's a choice that you want to be able to make, because some of your schools, you're going to be set that like at EMKS, you're taking college level courses. For the most part, whether you want it or not, that's just a part of the curriculum. You're going to do it because we really believe in building college graduates. So that's one of our missions. But if that's not something that you're with, then that may not be the best school for you. There may be something else that actually better fits what you're interested in and what you're really thinking long term.
Absolutely.
There are tons of schools with, in addition to college prep courses, we have a lot of schools that really invested in industry recognized credentials. And so that students are getting those trade certificates and things like that, or maybe getting a associate's degree while they're still in high school. So those are definitely options. One thing that I know we encourage students to do is attend those open houses, attend those shadow days. Like if those high schools are offering those opportunities, go to the school, see what the culture is like, interact with staff there, see if you can picture yourself there. I think that's really beneficial for students to do. Go to school Saturday if you can.
Go to school Saturday. Yeah. I mean, Show Me Casey Schools is trying to, again, simplify all of these processes by scheduling out and presenting opportunities for all of this, you know? And again, I mean, Nina, you know that I have talked about this before. We, you know, as a society, we've put a lot of time and energy into early childhood. And if we would just take some of that same energy and excitement and pump it into our middle schoolers who are learning how to balance those class schedules, learning how to create good study habits, learning how to communicate with their teachers, and going from having 2 teachers maybe to then having 7 teachers, right? All of these different things. And again, like pulling your kid into the fold and having, what if they want to become broadcasting and podcast, like there are pathways for all of these things. Talk to your kid, because what we know is not only from our own personal experiences growing up, right? But being parents ourselves, is that having these conversations with your kids and really trying to put them on a pathway to success is what will most likely result in that.
Yeah.
So don't try to push maybe what you want for them, but what do they want? That's going to get them across graduation day.
That's so real because the student investment is huge. Is your student invested in what they're learning and what they're doing? Or because you can tell, I will say as a counselor supporting students figuring out what they want to do, you can tell the difference between a student who's like, I'm here because my parents really wanted this and I'm not bought in as much compared to students that it's like, no, I'm here for me.
Yeah.
And this is my goal. And trying to help them change some of that mindset, especially when it's not student-centered, can be tough when they feel like everything's been already set for them and they've had no choice in advocacy for themselves.
Yeah.
So the earlier you can help them build that and build some of that personal responsibility of like, no, these are your choices. This is the things that you're going to do to help out. 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Would recommend.
Absolutely.
Love that.
So as we're wrapping up, if you all could share one thing that you want to share with parents that they can do to support their students in this transition. We've talked about searching for schools, getting an early start, bringing your student into the conversation. Is there something in addition to that that you think, yes, this thing families should absolutely be doing to help their students in transitioning into high school?
I think one thing to consider is what type of independence does your student already have or maybe not have. That is something that can be a really hard skill to build, and it's something really important because when you start that 9th grade, seriousness begins, right? That's the transcript that's going to go on to other people, no matter what path you may want. I still have jobs that ask me for transcripts.
That's right.
You never know when you need to pull that thing back out. Right. And it starts all in 9th grade. And that personal responsibility of how do I keep up with the assignments? How do I keep up with all these teachers with different rules or different expectations? And some of that starts at home. Does your child know how to do different things for themselves? Or are they still 100% reliant on you?
Right.
What are ways that you can start to shift that for them to build a little bit of that personal responsibility because it can transfer to the other aspects of their life. And it makes it that much easier when they get to that next level, when people expect them to do more for themselves, if they can have some of that at home. So they're like, oh yeah, I get it. My parents also expect me to do this little piece at home too.
That's right. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I would say daydream. Daydream together. Right?
Yeah.
And
Beautiful.
think about what would, you mentioned the film class earlier. My daughter, that would excite her. That's going to excite her. You know what I mean? And so find the exciting things.
Yeah.
And daydream together. Talk about what the possibilities are, and then go to City School Fair and say, who's got a film class? Who's got a culinary class?
Absolutely.
Who can teach me how to grow things,
It's a great opportunity to just connect with your student also, your child, right? You'll find that you start to learn more about them during that process, things that are really important to them, things that shifted for them that you thought that they were interested in and maybe not so much anymore, and these new things that they're really grasping onto. So it's a really interesting time to connect, have some one-on-one time with your student. And just get to know them, get to learn their hopes and dreams. And I love that you said that, just daydream together. Just think about the amazing possibilities that could happen and the great experience that they can have in high school, because it's absolutely possible that they can have a thriving, great experience in high school. We have the schools here to provide it for them. You all, thank you so much for joining me today on this. I hope that this helps families as they're preparing. You all know that we have our amazing navigators at Show Me Casey Schools that are here to support if families want someone to just kind of help them think through these different options and go through all of the different features and classes that schools offer. Our navigators are here to support with that. And so we will also have some resources in our show notes to support you on that journey. Stay tuned in to Show Me Casey Schools podcast. We'll be back next time. See ya. Show Me Casey Schools is committed to providing you with vital information that supports you while you support your child on their educational journey. Connect with us on social media at SMKCS and on YouTube at Show Me Casey Schools and on all your favorite podcast platforms.